Peace, Israel, and Yah bless. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. This lesson is going to be a redo. I'm going to try to do a condensed version of it, of the lesson that's entitled The Beginning of the Day, Exodus out of Egypt. Once again, this is a redo, a much more condensed version of the beginning of the day, Exodus out of Egypt. Why I am redoing this is because there's some errors in there that I saw after listening to that video where I was speaking of things beginning on the 13th, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to correct that. I'm going to make that correction right now via this video speaking specifically pertaining to the Passover, when it begins, and also the Feast of Unleavened Bread. All right, so I'm going to get this clear on exactly when those 2 days actually take place. We're going to go ahead and clarify and clear the air right now, because a few people may have been confused with this, and the goal is not to cause any confusion. All right, once again, brace yourselves. Okay, tighten up your jaws. Don't turn to the left or to the right, or you will get hit in the mouth. We're to walk the straight and narrow way of the Most High's commandments. All right, we will start off in the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 12. That is the chapter where the whole entire Passover is laid out and explained. All right, we're going to start off at verse 6 of Exodus chapter 12. Verse 6 of Exodus chapter 12. Once again, this is a correction video to the beginning of the day, Exodus out of Egypt. All right. Exodus chapter 12, verse 6 reads, "And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole congregation and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening." All right. Excuse me. On the 14th day. On the 14th day at evening is when the 15th day begins. At evening means dark. All right, so on the 14th day at evening, once it gets dark, that's when we kill the Passover. So actual Passover starts on the 15th, not the 14th. We just keep the animal up. Okay, we're to pull him out on the 10th day, and we're to keep him up until the 14th day at even. The 14th day at even is when the 15th day begins. All right, so just wanted to get that clear. We're to keep it up. Let me read that verse 6 of Exodus chapter 12. "And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month," the 14th day of the month of Abib. So we're keeping this animal up until the 14th day. We took him out of the herd on the 10th day, so we will keep him up for 4 days. All right, "And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening." So we're going to kill this animal on the evening of the 14th, which is the beginning of the 15th. All right, so I hope that is understood. Let's go down to verse 16 of the same chapter, Exodus chapter 12. Verse 16 reads, "And in the first day there shall be a holy convocation, and in the 7th day there shall be a holy convocation to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat, and that only must be done," i.e., your food. Okay? So no manner of work are to be done in those days. All right? Now, let's move down to one verse. We're going to read the next verse, which is verse 17. Verse 17 reads, "And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever." So, Feast of unleavened bread, all right, as well as Passover, is actually, they're both running together. on the same day. That day being the 15th or the 14th at even, which begins the 15th day. All right, let's move down to verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at even. All right, on the 14th day of the month, once it gets dark, 14th day is over. It's now dark. Here comes the 15th. Ye shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. Okay, so we're to eat unleavened bread for a week. All right, so we understand clearly that the feast of unleavened bread starts off on the 15th day, which is the evening of the 14th, which is the same time, the evening of the 14th, when we kill the Passover. The evening of the 14th is the beginning of the 15th. The day starts at dark, starts at even, or what you will call evening. When that sun goes down and begins to be dark, that's when we started the Passover. All right, that's when we started to cook this lamb. All right, also, as we have just read in verse 18, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month at even, the same instructions that we were given to cook the lamb in verse 6. To cook the lamb for Passover, we were to keep it up until the 14th day, and we were to kill it at even on the 14th. Now, when it deals with unleavened bread, we come down to verse 18. It's stating the same thing, same instruction. Okay? In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at even, same instruction we were given to cook the Passover and to kill the Passover in verse 6. So we see that the Feast of Unleavened Bread and Passover, they both begin on the 14th day at even, which is the beginning of the 15th day. All right. Let's move down to verse 25. We are in Exodus chapter 12. Verse 25 lets us know exactly where we can keep the Passover. All right. Verse 25 reads, And it shall come to pass, when ye come to the land which Yah thy strong one will give you, according as he has promised, that ye shall keep this service. So this service of Passover is to be kept in the land. It's not to be kept outside of the land. Like I've stated in previous videos, their camps is charging you an absorbent amount of money to come to a Passover feast. They have lamb and the drinks, and they're all dressed up looking crazy and telling you it's a Passover dinner. Let me reread verse 25 so you'll understand where Passover is to be kept. And it shall come to pass, verse 25 of Exodus chapter 12, when ye be come to the land which Yah will give you, that land is Canaan, according as he hath promised, that ye shall keep this service. So we're to keep this service in the land. While we are in captivity, we are still to observe it, okay? We're to observe it simply by, number one, you'll be in your house. I put red tape on the three corners above and the two sides of my doorpost. Okay? And there's no cooking of the lamb. You're not supposed to cook lamb or eat lamb or anything like that, for the simple fact that the lamb has to be roasted with fire. This has to be done in the land. The lamb has to be pulled out of the flock on the 10th day. It has to be a male. Has to be of the first year. Has to be without blemish. Okay, so if you're doing this and you're eating a lamb, stating that you're celebrating Passover, and we are not in Israel, we're not in the land of Canaan, you did not separate that lamb on the 10th day. You don't know if that lamb is male or female. You don't know if that lamb had a blemish. You don't know if that lamb was sick. Okay, so these are the things that you do not know. That is why it is clearly stated here that this is to be kept in the land. We can commemorate it, etc., outside of the land, which is what we do now in these many places. Okay, we're practicing the righteous acts, so to speak. But you are not to roast anything. You're not to cook anything. You're certainly not to eat any lamb, because you don't have all these criteria in place. And also, same thing with Tithe, tithe and offerings. All of these things were to be given. A tithe is to be offered in the place that the Most High chose. Your Baptist church, you chose that. Your Anglican church, you chose that. Your Seventh-day Adventist church, you chose that, and you chose that building and where you put that and where you decided to build it. You all chose that. It is not a place that the Most High chose. So to offer up any of your offerings, to offer up your tithe, you are to do this in the place. And that's only one place that the Most High chose. So as it pertains to offering specifically a tithe, if you are tithing and you live anywhere outside of Israel and the third temple is not built and you're giving money to men, you are walking contrary to the Most High's law. Number one, you're giving money, calling it a tithe. The Most High never instructed tithe to be money, so you're breaking his law. Two, you're giving money to a man that the Most High did not instruct you to give money to. He has to be a Levite. Has to be proven through genealogy. Okay. Next, you're giving money in a place, in a specific building that the Most High never instructed for you to give money in that building. And you're doing it in a place, a nation that the Most High never instructed you to give money as a tithe in the first place. So when you're tithing, what you're doing, you're breaking the Most High's law. You're doing things that he did not instruct you to do. Make sure you tell your pastor, your rabbi, or whatever it is you've got, tell him he owes you a refund. Now, let's move down to verse 26 of Exodus chapter 12. Verse 26 reads, "And it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, What mean ye by this service? When the children ask, Why is it that we are to remain in our dwelling from even to even?" All right. Why are we not to come out the house all night? Okay. For this Passover service. Okay. Then we have to answer why we're keeping this service. And the answer is at verse 27. "That ye may say, It is the sacrifice of Yah's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt." Remember, we were in Goshen. "When he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed the head and worshipped." So when you ask, well, what is it that we're doing on the 14th day at even, start of the 15th day, what are we commemorating and why are we doing this? We're not to tell the children that JC died for our sins and rose up on the third day. We're not to tell our children that nonsense. It is clearly stated what we are to tell our children once they ask us, what is the meaning of this commemoration of this Passover? What is it and why are we doing it? I'm going to reread verse 27 again so you understand and you don't go uttering to your children, your grandchildren, that JC died for you and rose up on the third day because he was killed by some Romans. That is a lie. Verse 27, "That ye shall say, It is the sacrifice of Yah's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Egypt, of the children of Israel in Egypt, in Mizraim," okay, "when he smote the Egyptians." So if you want to know who died for you, Egyptians did. Egyptians were ransomed for you, Israel. "And delivered our houses, and the people bowed the head and worshiped." So we understand clearly what Passover is for, and we understand clearly what we're to tell our children and our grandchildren as we commemorate this day in these strange lands. All right. So we've got 27. Now let's move over to Leviticus. Doing a condensed version. That way this correction can be clearly noted. We're at Leviticus, and we will read Leviticus chapter 23, Leviticus chapter 23, and we will read verse 5 and verse 6. And this pertains to Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. It is on the same day. All right. Now, let's verify this. Leviticus chapter 23, and we're dealing with verse 5. And verse 5 of Leviticus chapter 23 reads, in the 14th day of the first month, at even. See, that's the key point that we have to keep in mind. 14th day, at even, is Yah's Passover. At even is dark. When it gets dark, that's when the 15th day begins. Okay? In the 14th day of the first month, at even, is Yah's Passover. So we started cooking this Passover. When is the 14th? As the 14th is coming to an end, it gets dark, we start to cook the Passover. That's the 15th day. All right? Once again, verse 5 of Leviticus chapter 23. In the 14th day of the first month, which is Abib, at even is Yah's Passover, when it becomes to be dark. That's when the Passover begins, on the 14th at even, which is the beginning of the 15th. All right, verse 6. And on the 15th day, the 15th day is nothing but the evening of the 14th. It's the same thing. All right, so hope you guys understand that. Hope you all can understand that. So we're seeing here at verse 6, and on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. All right. Unto Yah, 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. All right. So what this is stating here is just being stated in two different ways. Okay. Verse 6, as it pertains to Passover, is letting you know that Passover starts on the 15th, which is the 14th at even. All right. Now, verse 6 is letting you know on the 15th day of the same month, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which means the Feast of Unleavened Bread is starting on the 14th at dark. So Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread begins on the same day. It begins on the 15th day, which is the 14th day at dark. So I hope that makes things clear to you. That way that correction is made. Okay, that way no one is confused. Okay, because I did review that video and I was speaking of the 13th, etc., etc. So I will correct myself in that. That way you clearly understand that Passover begins the day of the 14th at even. That's the key point to remember. Okay, the 14th at even. At even on the 14th is the beginning of the 15th. Same thing with the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The Feast of Unleavened Bread begins on the 15th day, as we're reading right here at verse 6. But the 15th day begins on the 14th day at even. So hopefully that corrects, a matter of fact, that does correct the error. And I hope you have a chance to go back and review it. Okay, so that corrects, that way everyone understands clearly that during Passover, okay, on the 14th at even, which is the start of the 15th, we cooked the animal. We were to stay in our houses until morning. Okay, Pharaoh came, told Moshe and everyone else that we needed to get out, but we didn't leave out at that night for the simple fact that everyone was given instruction to remain in their house until the morning. No one was to leave the house until the morning. And in the morning is when we burnt anything that remaineth of that Passover. Any meat that left over, that's when we burnt it. Okay, so coming out of Egypt would be on the 15th day. Let me make that specific. All right, so the 15th start, which is the evening of the 14th. Okay, so the 15th we're cooking, we're eating that night. All of that is the 15th. Okay, angel came through, killed the firstborn male and beast of everyone in Egypt. Pharaoh raises up in the middle of that night. It's the 15th still. Okay, tells Moshe to get his flocks and his herds and leave. But we don't leave then, because he's just speaking to Moshe and Aaron. Everyone else was given strict commandment to remain in their houses until the morning. So in the morning, we come out of our houses. If we have any meat remaining from the Passover, we burn that meat. We go to the Egyptians. Let me borrow that nice gold chain you've got, and those rings, those earrings too, and whatever else they had of value. And the Egyptians were fearful. They gave it to them. So we took it. And then we begin our trek out of Mizraim with the goods of the Egyptians. This happens on the 15th day, which began on the 14th at even. So I hope that makes things clear. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. Passover, feast of unleavened bread, same day. Same day. That day would be the 15th. Another way of saying the 15th would be the 14th at even. Peace, Israel, and Yah bless.